Hello and welcome to a very special series that I wanted to get started with you. It's called Beta Reading How To Part. I don't know. Because I don't know how long it's going to really take me to go over everything. But this is the first part in something that I've been asked about a couple of times. People who look at me, who come to me and they say, I would like to beta read, but I don't know how. So we're going to go through this together, and we're just going to go over some of the main points about how to beta read and what's expected of you if you decide to beta read. Here are the important points that we're going to go over. Who should beta read? What should beta read? Where should beta read? How should beta read? And closing points. Here are the important points we're going to cover: who, what, where, how, and then our closing comments, just to give you an idea of where we're going with this. Okay, to start out with, we want to go with who should be beta reading. Now, that's not to say that anybody is not equipped to beta read. Everybody is equipped to beta read. I believe anybody can beta read, but should you? You want to make sure that you are the target audience for that author's book. The target audience is a particular group at which a film, book, advertising campaign, etc. is aimed. Then there are the others, the people who do not fall into the target audience, whether that be demographic, genre enthusiastic, etc. To give you an idea, if you are going to be beta reading for a non-fictional psychological book about the psychological effects of giving birth, and you have never given birth, you might not be the best person to look at it. You also might not be the best person if you aren't a psychiatrist or a psychologist who has studied that. And you may not be the right demographic if you don't have in-depth experience with it. For instance, the people that are going to be asked to read a book that's non-fictional about giving birth are probably doulas, midwives, doctors, OBGYNs, and people who have given birth and can give their personal experiences. Another example of this is if it is a young adult fiction book, fantasy specifically, if it's a young adult fiction fantasy book, and you are someone who prefers self-help books, adult thrillers, literary works, you may not enjoy reading a fantasy young adult novel by somebody who isn't even on the market yet. Your viewpoint is going to be skewed by your preferences and by your life experiences. So when you're looking at beta reading for an author, you need to consider whether or not you would actually enjoy this book, and if you'd pick it up on your own to read in a bookstore or wherever you get your literature from. If you wouldn't pick it up on your own, you're probably not the target audience. Just keep that in mind when you're trying to pick something to beta read. Which pretty much covers our what? Questions to ask yourself before you beta read. Do you read the genre? Do you like the genre? Do you have the ability to read quickly and efficiently while also making notes? Can you be detail oriented? When you're beta reading, what you're doing is you're going through someone's manuscript and you're taking notes in real time to give feedback to the author about how their manuscript can be improved. So then we get to where do you beta read? Now, I was going to offer a slide about where you can go to offer your services, but that's really not very hard to do. It's on social media, it's on Instagram, it's on YouTube, TikTok. Goodreads has a beta reading place. Reddit has a subreddit for beta readers. You just have to look into the social stuff that you already have. Facebook. Put yourself out there. Try and gather some information. Follow authors, follow self-publishing authors to see who is making calls for beta readers. And if you like a particular author and you want to beta read for them, it doesn't hurt to send them a message and ask them, hey, I would like to beta read for you. But where you beta read is going to come down to something as simple as Google Docs, which is free to use. It only requires a Gmail account to access it. You can use BookFunnel. Though that is $100 for the author to use. It's usually better for ARC readers. It still is an option for beta readers, just not my favorite. Or you can use PDF, which is also free to use and only requires an email address of any kind or a Dropbox to put the PDF into. So here are the basic points for beta reading. Understanding the difference between constructive and critical comments. Show, don't tell, or active versus passive voice. Consistency in language that you use, and noticing and understanding the overall story development. Constructive criticism builds up the writer, not tear them down. It gives helpful suggestions instead of vague ideas, and it provides a stepping stone for the writer to leap off of or from and improve their craft. Critical criticism tears down and discourages. It provides vague, general feedback in a defeated tone, and it usually involves insults or provides no support for the writer to hone their craft. Example 1. Constructive criticism. This dialogue does not engage me as a reader. The lack of dialogue tags does not give me any imagery, so I can't visualize the characters in this conversation. Critical criticism would sound like, this dialogue is impossible to read. I don't understand what's going on. Let's go to example number 2. Constructive criticism sounds like, this paragraph has a lot of abrupt sentences. As a reader, it would flow better for me if you could combine some of them and shorten the paragraph to its main points. Critical criticism sounds like, this paragraph is a mess. I have no idea what happened here. As you can see, the main difference between the two types is the helpfulness of the feedback. Constructive criticism balances pointing out a difficult spot in the manuscript with ideas on how it could be benefited. Critical criticism, while helpful in targeting a rough spot, does only that. It doesn't give you any kind of information about what actually is the problem and how to fix it, and it usually leaves the writer feeling defeated. At the end of the day, most critical criticism will be dismissed completely because it just doesn't help. And then you end up wasting your time and the author's time. I have beta read a couple of times for different people. One beta reading I completely regret doing because I gave nothing but critical criticism. It was one of my very first beta reading journeys, I guess. And I could not get into the book. It was a genre I liked. It was a genre I thought I could really get into. I've read many like it. I thought it was something I could really delve into. But the author's writing style and mine just completely clashed. And I gave nothing super helpful to that author. And unfortunately, it did discourage them. And to this day, I feel bad about that. It's not something I'm very proud of. But I learned from it. And I hope that author did too. Just in the sense of, don't take every beta reader's criticism to heart and don't take every criticism seriously. There's really nothing else to do about it. You can't just stop. That you have dreams to fulfill. You can't just stop doing what you're doing. What I should have done in that instance was simply emailed the person and said, hey, I don't think our reading and writing styles mix very well. I don't think I'm the target audience for this book, and I wish you well. That's what I should have done. It may have still been disheartening and a little discouraging, but I'm sure it would have hurt a lot less than what I had done. When you're going in as a beta reader, just keep that in mind. You want to be constructive more than critical. All right, so now let's move on to show, don't tell, which is basically active versus passive voice. So when you're going through a manuscript, you want to find show, don't tell, which is show lets the reader infer for themselves, show engages the reader's mind, and show paints a picture rather than tells you what to see. Tell is blunt and to the point, and it works well for some genres. It works well for young adult and children's books. Tell makes more for a boring read, unfortunately, for adult readers. It's not to say that it's all boring, it's just a lot more blunt. And if it's not in the target audience that you want to go for, then you need to reconsider using passive voice. Tell tells you what you're supposed to see rather than letting you figure it out for yourself. So an example we have here, this is show. Catherine's dress caught on the edge of the car door, tearing from hem to knee in a jagged line. She stumbled onto the curb and cursed loudly, stamping her foot and holding her hem up in dismay. It's ruined! I'll look ridiculous if I walk into that dinner now. So that's show. Tell is, getting out of the car, Catherine tore her dress on the door. She felt extremely angry and started to shout. She'd be embarrassed if she went into dinner now. Neither one of those are inherently bad paragraphs. However, one of them definitely gives you more to infer as a reader than the other. Show ends up painting a more engaging picture, and the main difference is, like I said, active versus passive voice. Active voice draws the reader into the story and makes them feel like they're more of an active part of what's going on in it. You can feel like you're standing on that curb with Catherine and watching this unfold. Whereas when you're using passive voice, you feel more like a passive bystander who's kind of watching the world go by as you're there, just kind of looking at it, but not really affected by it. Some tip-offs for passive voice are the use of was, had been, would be, would have been, things like that. You can Google the rest of them, just things to be on the lookout for. I do want to point out that not all uses of those words are bad. So as a beta reader, don't go through a manuscript and highlight every time they said was, had been, etc. Sometimes those are perfectly fine, especially when you've had an extremely heavy paragraph or chapter and you kind of want to bring it back a little bit and let the reader have some breathing room after an extremely intense moment. Why does it matter if a beta reader can see the difference between active and passive voice? Simply because in doing so, you'll be able to help your author make a more engaging manuscript and become a better author overall. It lets them hone their craft, it lets them delve more into their world, and in the end, it will be a better product for them and for you to enjoy later. Okay, so one of the final points for a beta reader is being consistent. You want to make sure that you consistently show up for the work that you offered or promised to do. You want to keep your suggestions consistent. You want to keep an open line of communication, and you want to fill out any of the surveys you're provided. Some authors will prefer for you to leave comments in the documentation that they give you. That's what I did for my beta readers. I gave everybody their own Google Doc and then asked them to please comment in it, and I gave them commenter privileges rather than editor privileges. That is something that Google Docs allows you to do. PDF also allows you to do this. Some authors, however, do not want comments. And I understand why. It's not something that I have a personal preference for, but I do understand that getting comments from 20 beta readers, 15, 10 beta readers, it can be extremely overwhelming, especially when you have a couple of hundred in one person's and a couple of hundred in another. When I had beta readers come through for mine, I had one commenter who left 331 comments. Well, they did more of an inline editing than beta reading, which is not something that you are required to do. Let me put that out there real quick. Beta readers are not required to do inline editing. And if your author is demanding that you do inline editing, it's okay for you to step back and say, whoa, this is not the project that I want to get on board with. It's totally fine. You can say no. But this person did, and they were very sweet, and I loved it, and it was so helpful, and it has already helped me make a much better manuscript. The last thing I want to go over that beta readers should take note of or just pay attention to is the overall development of the story and the plot and the characters themselves. So these are called macro suggestions, and what they are is character development. Do the characters have a relatable character development? Do they learn something along the way? And the reason I said relatable character development is because not all characters grow as society measures growth. Some people are going to devolve. Some people are going to slip into a villain arc, and that is so fun to read. It's just as much as fun to read as reading someone grow. But you want to make sure that it's relatable. You want to make sure that their reasons, that their backstory makes sense. Why did they become a villain? Why are they evil? Why are they mad? Why are they upset? Why did they become good? Why did they overcome something? Does that make sense for the character, where they ended up? Plot development. Can you follow the plot? Do the twists make sense once they're revealed? Not all twists are seen coming, but after they come, they should make sense. A twist should have the reader going back and being like, wow, I cannot believe I missed that. Unfinished plot points and threads. Did every point have a conclusion? Was every thread tied off? Did every hint they leave have a payoff? And it may not in that book. They may be writing a series, so if it doesn't always have if it doesn't always get tied off, make sure you just mention to the author that if they haven't already planned for it to get tied off in the sequel, that they probably should. My only final notes are basically to jump in feet first. Get your feet wet, start with something small. You can start with short stories, you can start with children's books, something that doesn't take a lot of time and effort but still gets your feet wet, and then you can jump into some of the heavier novels that are coming out and that are out there. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section. I'd be happy to answer some of them. Go through and see what I didn't cover. Hopefully I will cover it in the next videos because this isn't an entire synopsis of what a beta reader is supposed to do, but I do think it's a good starting point. So again, if you have any questions, please leave those in the comments down below. And thank you. Thank you so much for following me along. I really appreciate it. Bye-bye.